Well, hello everyone. Thank you for coming back to my channel. This one is going to be Get a Life number 3. And as I said before, Get a Life number 3 is going to be on the United Nations. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the United Nations. And the next one I'm going to do is going to be on NATO. And the reason I'm going to do NATO next is that in my videos you see I am a firm believer of competition. Now, it may be that the United Nations chooses not to listen to anything I have to say. So therefore, I'm going to be doing one to NATO to challenge the United Nations. Now, I'm not necessarily trying to get rid of the United Nations, but if they do get rid, they will get rid of themselves because of their actions. And everyone that doesn't do the job that they're supposed to be doing will cease to exist. Now, we have a little problem with the United Nations to begin with. And to begin with, it makes me wonder about them, and I will tell you why. A lot of this has come about recently because of the problem that Israel has had. And I think even before Israel had the problem, I already started investigating Islam. So when I talk about the United Nations, I'm going to tell the people about Islam that they have a little bit of a problem. The Islamic people are lying to the world because it is not one religion, it is two religions. And the religion is about half of the people that call themselves Islamic people worshiping Allah. Now, Allah is the same name as God, so it's the one and only supreme being that everyone should be worshiping. But in fact, half of the people are worshiping Muhammad. Now, when you worship Muhammad, Muhammad wasn't perfect. We know that absolutely because we don't know for sure whether Muhammad did any of these things that he's accused of doing, because there is no writing close enough to when he lived that we really know about his life. So we may be calling Muhammad names that he doesn't deserve. So everyone has to understand that. But basically, the thing everyone knows about Muhammad, he's a pedophile. He had sex at over 50 years old, supposedly with a 9-year-old girl. And I will just say up front, any 21-year-old adult male that has sex with a girl younger, 14 years or younger, is also a pedophile. So since these things are true about human beings and they want to deny it because, just like I said, the attitude, run amok, horsepower engine is, if it doesn't agree with you, kill it. Now you can say, oh, that's kind of a stupid comment. Well, we know that there's over 100 million Russians that got killed as a result of it. So you got to start looking at history, and history will teach us how we should be acting. So the Islamic people that believe in Allah and tries to submit themselves to Allah is totally opposite from those that are submitting themselves to Satan or Muhammad. They're both equivalent to each other. See, we don't know if Muhammad did all the things Quran tells us he did, but if he did and he didn't repent of some of them, he's probably going to end up in hell. And if he ends up in hell, you'll end up in hell too if you do the same things he does. The only thing is, you won't get to visit with Muhammad because hell is an individual place. You are there by yourself, suffering as a result of the actions you committed, and you know they're absolutely wrong, and you knew when you did them they were wrong. Now, that brings me back to what we're talking about now, the United Nations. I know the United Nations started in San Francisco, and I have already talked about Sally Stanford, and Sally Stanford was the unofficial host of the United Nations delegates when they were in San Francisco. And all the people that wrote about being there, if they told the truth, they probably were in her brothel. Now, the only reason I mention that is she clearly in her book wrote that she knows the people were negotiating some of the issues of the United Nations as they were being formed, and they made agreements while they were in her brothel. Now, does that mean that she participated? We don't know. We don't care. The United Nations got started. They're in New York now, and they're responsible for having united all the nations of the world. Now, I don't blame you totally, because you were given a job that had a hole in the bag. You didn't have a chance from day one. And the reason I say that is the most despicable country that has ever existed, far more than Germans that were trying to exterminate the Jewish people, the Soviet Union killing Russians to make their principle go forward. Now, when unfortunately the Soviet Union was on the American or the Allies side during the Second World War. So when America won the war, Russia got to come along for the ride. Now, the Russians will tell you, and I know that because I know some Russians, their story is the Russians are the ones that won the war against Germany during the Second World War, and America just jumped in at the end in order to take the credit for it. Well, as I said, opinions are like snowflakes. Everyone is different. You can have any opinion you want. But what we do know is that Russia has the same ability when the United Nations were formed to veto that the United States of America had. So when the United Nations had a job to do, they had a job that was impossible. And how do we know that? Well, the principle, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, the United Nations are here to make sure all nations are united, that no nation tries to attack another nation and steal their property, territories, and destroy their inhabitants. Every nation is united with each other to support every other nation, that if a rogue nation starts such atrocious, unacceptable, despicable action as to attack another nation, then they need to be stomped on hard. And that means, number one, you don't worry about killing off their army. That's stupidity. What you do is you kill the leader. You incarcerate him, put him in a cage, or you kill him. Now, unfortunately, we know that we're talking about Putin. He supposedly got elected for another 6 years. Well, that just shows you how brainwashed the Russians still are. Now, you don't have to say, oh, I'm just making things up about the Russians. I'm saying things nasty. No, I'm saying that I feel sorry for the Russians. I feel sorry that they feel obligated to vote for Putin. Anyone that knows things about politicians is the politician can't have the same job more than twice. He cannot have half of his life in, quote, political service, because all he is a pig eating at the public trough. And one of the biggest pigs we have on the universe today, and probably the biggest pig, is Putin. Putin had bragged, I heard at one time, I have more money than anyone else in Europe. No, he's stolen the Russians' money and put it in his own pocket. That who he's got more. That's what proves he's nothing but a pig eating at the public trough. All right, we were talking about the problems and with Putin. Now, Putin has been in longer than he needs to be. Putin needs to be taken care of. In other words, Putin needs to get out of Dodge. And I did on my other one say if he had a high enough IQ, he would take what he has and he'd run with it. Well, as I said before, I don't think he's that smart. Putin's going to be in until someone gets rid of him. And all Putin's going to do is cause problems until then. Now, the one thing that I do like about Putin is I saw on the internet him shaking hands with the leader of Iran. Iran is not quite as bad as Putin, because Iran has, the leader of Iran has murdered quite a few women and needs to be caged or killed as well. But he has probably only 1/4 of the people stashed up in his hit list than Putin has. Putin's probably killed at least 4 times the amount of people he has. Now, one of the reasons that I said God has a sense of humor is I've been planning to do this video now for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I knew that I had to do the UN, but I did not think about it a lot at the time. But when you understand what it is I expect from the UN and what we got from the UN, I had a lot more material to talk about than I even dreamed about. And that is that when we say United Nations, that's exactly what I said. The name says it. The nations are united. And that means that if one of them slips out of the fold and starts doing what's wrong, the other United Nations, every one of them, will join together to bring the problem maker back into the fold. Now, being an American, I let everyone kind of have their own opinion. And like I said, opinions are like snowflakes. You can have any opinion you want. Everyone has a right to believe anything they want to believe. But everyone also has a responsibility to obey the laws of the land. That's why religion and government do not mix, like oil and water, like difference between men and women, between good and evil, heaven and hell, God and Satan, all opposites. And that is the way you have to look at religion and government. So if you are more of a religious person, you should not even come close to a government position. And as I said, it took me 12 years for me to listen to the Lord and learn that I was not to be a preacher or teacher. And I realize now, with the experiences that I've been given with the city of Martinez and the stupidity of our Supreme Court of the United States of America that caused me to write my books, that I am what you would call a political person. Now, the United Nations is not a religious organization. They're political. Now, there are some problems with political people, and that is we have religious people. We have what they refer to as religious fanatics. Now, a religious fanatic has about as much chance to convince someone of his religious beliefs. He has 0 chance of convincing anyone of anything. Now, the reason I'm making this point about religious fanatics is a lot of people will agree. All of us usually know religious fanatics, and religious fanatics have gone over the top. They don't go out killing people like the run-amok horsepower engine does, but what they do is they are totally unreasonable in the discussion for discovering the truth. Now, I already knew that, but what I've learned recently from listening to what the United Nations has done is realize that a babbling politician is exactly the same as a religious fanatic. They say things that are so ridiculous that you cannot even begin to believe that the things are coming out of their mouth. And those are things that happened with South Africa, bringing their things up against Israel, and the rest of the jerks that went along with it. But the reason I know that is absolutely true, I learned even after I was offended by the stupidity of the United Nations. I thought, United Nations, why are we spending money and have that land in New York that's worth so much money for an organization that is totally worthless? They do nothing of benefit to anyone. And then it dawned on me. I have been a member of the American Legion Post 826 in Woodland Hills, California, for 12 to 15 years. Now, that's because I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area. When I moved down here, as I said, my wife was a lawyer, and one of the guards, as I would go into the Van Nuys courthouse, he would do the searching for the weapons and things, and he would always ask me, he had talked to me a few times before, have you moved your membership to Southern California yet? And he got on me so many times, I did finally move it from San Francisco down to Woodland Hills. And I've been going to the Woodland Hills Post once to twice a month, at least, for the last 12 to 15 years. Now, what I saw the last time I went in, and this is after 12 or 15 years, so we have to go back to how slow I was at picking up that I should not have been a preacher or teacher. I walked on the door and printed right on the door. I could not believe what I was reading, because I've been going there for 12 to 15 years, and it's printed on the door that I go in and out of every single time that I go to the American Legion, and I have never, ever noticed it before. And what it says is, the only thing for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. Now, when I was young, I heard it a little differently. I was taught, when I was young, evil succeeds when good men do nothing. Now, what that told me within this last week, the first time I learned it, things aren't like I thought. Because I always thought you could be for, you could be against, or you could be neutral. Now, you remember some of the garbage the United Nations has been doing? I know the United States of America abstained. That means they didn't take a position. Well, that means that they're neutral. No, it doesn't. Because it clearly says evil only succeeds when good men do nothing. So that means if there's any evil in the world, some men or women have not stepped up to the plate and done what they should have done to prevent the evil from coming about. Now, what happened to Israel? Anyone that doesn't know it was evil, and we have to say, well, I think the woman from South Africa didn't know any better. Well, the only thing we can say is, well, that's unfortunate, because when evil succeeds, it continues to repeat itself. So now all we can hope is the next time that it happens, instead of happening to the same people it happened to, it happens to your friends and family. And if you're okay with more than 1,200 of your close friends and family being raped and murdered and taken prisoner, then you did the right thing. But if you did not approve of that, you were blowing hot air. You knew nothing about what you were talking about, because if you're not for Israel, you are against them. So that means that you, as an African American, and that surprises me, because African Americans have had a problem. And so you would think that when African Americans got to have the freedom and equality that they've deserved forever and finally achieved it, they certainly would not make such stupid mistakes as to pick on people that are doing exactly what's right. Now, most of my things like criticism. No, I'm not criticizing. You know why I'm not criticizing? Because I haven't even mentioned the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Desert Storm, and for Russia, Afghanistan, which was the result of breaking up the Soviet Union. Now, why do I mention those? Because the United Nations was formed right after the Second World War. They were a United Nations when all of these things went on. If you're going to do your job is not to have any wars. Now, there's a simple way to do it. If there is good and evil, you're supposed to be on the side of good. And that means when someone steps out of line and does what's evil, you step on him hard. Now, if South Africa wanted to do something right, they could have sent their army to Israel and says, we're a little concerned about the people that might be bystanders that are getting killed, so we're going to send our army to help defeat Hamas without killing the bystanders. Well, if you know how to do it better than Israel, you should have sent them there to do it. If you don't, you're blowing hot air, and everyone knows it, except you. Now, it's time for you to learn it. And I don't want to be critical, so I'm not blaming you. Like I said, you had an impossible task to begin with. But we do not need you if you're not doing a job. And your job is to make sure no nation attacks any other nation on the face of the planet. And if they do, you step on them hard. And the way you step on them hard is you take every one of your members and get each one of them having an army, and you overwhelm that country so bad that you have a soldier there for every member of the population. And we know that works because when the Polynesian people found out that one of the English ships were going to take over the Polynesian islands, and they sent people there with their guns to take over, the Polynesians were aware of it, and so what they did is they had two Polynesians standing right alongside of every single English soldier that had a weapon. And when they announced that they were taking over, the Polynesian leader stood up and said, well, we were told you were going to do that. But if you look at all of your men, you will see two Polynesians with knives or swords standing right next to them. And if someone fires one shot, 100% of these soldiers, including you, will be terminated immediately. Well, the gentlemen got in their ship and left, and they joined the United States of America. So we can thank England for having the Hawaiian Islands as one of the states, from a man that knew how to handle a problem. Now, I'm going to tell United Nations you have had an impossible task, and Putin is what's left over from what you can't really solve, and I don't know how you're going to deal with it. But I'm going to give you a suggestion, and if you follow my suggestion, then you will be the nation you're supposed to be. Now, as I've already said, my next video is going to be on NATO. It is going to compete with you to be the world order if necessary. So you've got two choices, in my opinion. Start doing the job or get out of the kitchen. Now, that's not my idea. That's Harry Truman's. If you can't stand the heat in the kitchen, get out. And this is what needs to be done. We have a new thing now called artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is making big headroads into the medical field. And a close friend of mine, Susie Bash, is helping push artificial intelligence, and they're saying how successful it is. Artificial intelligence will guarantee that when it tells you, it's telling you what's right, it's not making a mistake. It's not a babbling politician. It's a machine that knows how to get it right 100% of the time. It won't make mistakes like South Africa did. It will be right every single time. So when artificial intelligence tells you this country needs stepping on, you start calling the other countries and setting up arrangements for the armies to get there. That's what the Secretary General is for, to make sure he sends the armies to help the people defending themselves that need to be defended. And if we do that, then we have resolved the problem with the United Nations, and they will be exactly that. It unites the nations of the world and ends the murder and mayhem years on the planet. And with that, I'm sure my time is up. For now, I'm going to say goodbye. If you believe anything I've said or anything that is true, I appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel and that you would come back and listen to me again. And I look forward to seeing you on Get a Life number 4. If you tell your friends, I appreciate that too. And for now, I'm going to say goodbye.